Anyway, welcome everyone to the Keshe Plasma Reactor Group. I apologize that we're half hour late today, but there's a lot of new technical difficulties to deal with here. Okay, so suffice to say, it's it's still Tuesday, April 3rd, 2018, in my part of the world, but only for another hour and a half. Most of the world, it's now Wednesday, April 4th, 2018. And my name's Rick Crammond. I'm your host in the Keshe Plasma Reactor Group. And we might as well launch into today's activities. We're going to change this.
Your live stream is what, under KFSSI events? What is the number?
I'm not sure what the actual number is. I can put the link in the chat.
Good, because it's under KFSSI events.
Where's the chat?
Because I got this on the computer, but I haven't got the number.
Hang on, I've got a window open somewhere here that's talking.
In Zoom or in live stream number?
Man, where is that coming from?
Somebody giving up. Is that Japanese or Chinese or Vietnamese?
Okay, good. Got it. Stop that.
I can check and get right back to you on that number.
I've got the live stream, but I've got the 34th One Nation.
I just have it under KFSSI/plasma group. Livestream.com/KFSSI plasma group. I just put the link in the chat there.
Well, that should be enough. Thank you.
Yeah, that should work if we need to do that.
Is 69? Do you want me to give that number?
Could you please?
I'm reading on my screen 690-493-485.
That's the Zoom meeting number, not
okay.
The
I'm sorry.
We're already in that meeting, so I don't think that's what they wanted. Is that right, John? He just wanted?
Yeah, that's probably correct.
Okay.
Apparently, Plasma Group is opening right now. I'm looking at my other. Yeah, I've got you on the live stream also, so you're live there also, Rick.
Yeah, I can see that seems to be working.
We got Stephen Drysdale there.
Yeah, I haven't even looked at the chat there yet. Yeah, and I have to get the YouTube. Okay, YouTube's working, and all right. Oops.
Too many feet in your plate.
Well, I've got about 15 windows open right now, and they're all over 3 monitors, and it's pretty busy. And one of them just started talking. I had to find it in order to stop it talking. It was me talking, but in the echo. Okay, just got to get my other Zoom window ready and this other chat out of the way. Okay, I think we're ready to begin here. Does anybody have something that they'd like to present? Generally, we start with Lee Coates, for example. If Lee, do you have something that you want to bring up this week?
I don't really have anything to show this week. I was tearing down my health unit in the living room, the one that I hit on the PVC pipe frame. And right after I tore it down, all of a sudden I had a headache. I had disconnected the 8 magravs that were in this health unit, which had been running for about 6 months. So I had just a 7-watt LED light on the end of them. They're all in series. And I'm just wondering if all the other magravs in the house got mad at me and gave me a headache.
That's very strange. Do you get headaches very often, or is this?
No, I hardly ever get a headache.
Wow, isn't that something, eh? Getting a headache when the magravs are removed. That sort of indicates a dependence there.
You're on the wave.
So
what was that, John? Sorry.
He's on the wave. If he hasn't got the field force wave, he's had it.
John, buenas tardes, buenas noches. Me gustaría
Presentar algo.
Sí, yo solamente quiero comentarle algo a Rick. Sí.
Do you understand some of what he's saying, Rick?
No, I didn't catch that.
Well, he wants to present something to you.
Oh, okay.
Fernando.
Ah, bien.
And what is it he'd like to present?
Yo sé lo que se siente esa presión.
He says he knows what you're feeling with this pressure all pushing towards you.
Pero todo es bien sencillo.
But everything's very simple.
¿Qué queremos decir? ¿Qué queremos expresar?
I don't understand. Does he want to present something or?
¿Quiere presentar algo o solo un comentario, Fernando?
Era un comentario y preguntarle a Rick.
¿Y qué quieres preguntarle?
Sobre la magnética y la gravitatoria y de cómo se acomodan los cuerpos a nivel de su esencia.
Ah, lo querés llevar a la historia. A él
Sí, yo quiero llevar las cosas profundamente, ¿sí?
Sí, bueno, pero él está con la cuestión reactores. No sé si le va a
Can
gustar
you
eso.
translate, John, as we go along so we don't get lost here?
He wanted to ask you what about the magnetic and the gravitational field.
Me interesa eso, me interesa la magnética y la gravitatoria, ¿sí?
Yeah, but I told him that you're more in the reactor business, so I don't know if you like this theme.
What's the theme? What's the question, or what do you mean? Just generally talk about it, or what?
The basics of magnetic and gravitational fields, the interaction.
Se pudiera decir que se comprende todo el mundo, pero no se comprende uno mismo. Es en base a la magnética y la gravitatoria.
A Rick no sé si le va a gustar estos temas, le va demasiado.
No importa. No
Fernando,
importa.
tenés que ser más específico con la pregunta. Te están dando tiempo, pero no estás siendo específico. Hacer una pregunta simple y clara, porque no se puede hacer esto.
¿Eres feliz en la vida? Estela Bilbao.
Fernando, estamos todos...
Sí, me estás preguntando sobre algo específico.
No, sí, pero Fernando, no metas leña al fuego. Rick no le gusta esta cosa así.
Me
Can you
retiro
tell me what's being said? Because this is not fair to the English people that have been
Rick,
waiting for the last hour for me to present an English
right,
show here. I'd like to
that's
have
exactly what we were telling Fernando. He needs to be short and specific on the question because he's taking the time. That's what we were
That's
saying.
right. So let's get it together. And if there's a question, then we can deal with it. If he just is commenting about me being under stress, then that's a different issue. And I don't want to deal with that right now.
No, right, exactly. That's what we were telling him. He needs to be specific on the question because it's taking the time of the whole group.
We can talk about maggrav fields if we wish. That might be okay. We have to, that's part of what we do here. But I'm not really prepared to just start from scratch, and usually we have it's in relation to some project. Why do you need to know? What is it? Have you not heard of magnetic gravitational fields before? Have you read the books? Have you done any studying? Have you been a student? Have you?
Yeah.
He's a student and he's a teacher also, but he's sort of buggering you, I think.
He wants to go back to basics, I guess, and that's part of the idea.
I think you're not in the mood of that right now, are you?
Well, no, it's not. That's not a problem. I just need to have a topic to go on. And if you say, well, let's talk about everything about plasma, or let's talk about everything about maggrav fields, or what are maggrav fields and so on. I mean, we can go into the book and get back into the basics and go back through all the stuff that's been gone over thousands and thousands of times already. Or we can try to, leapfrog and using the knowledge we have. Obviously, he has knowledge and knows about that sort of thing. Maybe we can leapfrog and go into, something else that's more interesting. Like we just need something to focus on where we can talk about the maggrav fields, like a reactor. Show me your reactor and we'll talk about the maggrav fields, what they might be coming out of the reactor, or show me a way that you measure the maggrav fields and we could talk about that. Or
Rick,
hello?
you hear me?
Yes.
Hello, it's Boris speaking.
Mm-hmm.
How are you? I could not sleep because I have a star system running here in my back.
Mm-hmm.
Can I show it?
Yes, that'd be great. Yeah, let's go with that, and we'll
go to the reactor group and show some reactors. Yes.
Yes, that's the idea. Like it's supposed to be a practical. Originally, when we started this group, it was about practical reactors, and people would bring in their inventions and different ideas, and we would discuss them and show them, and that's kind of the idea of this group. It's not just instruction on the basics, but I expect people to bring things to this conversation and not rely on me to have to present things all the time. I can show insights and aspects and that kind of thing, but it's up to you guys.
My video?
Yes, I think maybe I have to allow it or something here. Let me see. Okay, now maybe you can start it now. Is that true?
If it works here, my computer is not actualized. I have an old system. That's why it's getting problems sometimes. But I assume we'll arrange something.
We just see a black screen right now.
Yes, it's not.
Make sure.
It didn't open yet.
Do you have? Oh, there we have a video now.
Okay.
Or at least it's a still image. It's not moving yet, but we're getting there.
Can you see here the star system?
It's just, yes, just a minute till I get it pinned and spotlighted.
Yes.
Okay, so star system. Okay, we can see the three, seems to be like ping pong ball reactors on the bottom and one on the top, correct?
Yes.
Can you
That's
pin it
right.
on the Zooms?
And I have make this elastic, how do you say, how the Keshe reactor are made like this, that they can swing here. They have with elastic, with, and he's running now, and there's a very strong energy. The whole air inside here is vibrating, and I could not sleep because I have to turn it up when I sleep. It's too much energy. And I have filled up the 4 basic GANs with amino acid. There is, this one is the copper. Then we have zinc and CO2 and CH3 on the top. And all with corresponding amino acids. And it's really strong. And I have no more hunger, I have no more fatigue, and also my cat doesn't eat. It's very strong. And when somebody comes in here, I had several people, they come in and they don't know anything about plasma. And one woman, she works for the health organization from this part here, and she came and I offered her a glass of cold water, and she came in and her posture and her face changed immediately when she came in here, and she stopped to talk and didn't talk and was looking to that star formation and didn't understand nothing. Then I gave her some water with CO2 and zinc, and she drank it and went away.
Yeah. What do you have in the jar in the center again there?
This is just salt water.
Okay.
I try to make that homework that Jalal gave us to create with our hands. I told the people that I will do like this, and I try to create like this with my hands here. But,
Yeah, your video is really choppy, so we're not. Oh, I see you now there. Yeah.
Yes, I know. I have to actualize my system. And here I have another system, a little system. Let's wait to see it. This one is only the ball in the middle is with motor. This one I can change, can take away, put others.
This is excellent.
And it is very strong also. And here I have made that to feed the big one, actually. So I put here, I put CH3, stronger than the upper ball in the other system. And here I have 3 with silver GANs. And with 1, 2, 3, that it goes, my English is not too good. That it have different, here is 10 ml, 20 ml, and here is 30, something like this too.
The gradient, is that what you mean? The different gradient or different
yes.
strength?
Yes, different grid to get the fields running from the strong to the always. Like here's the same system. Yeah, you have here, you have the copper, zinc, and CO2. And what I understand is that the copper will feed the zinc will feed the CO2, and it makes the fields running like this. And I can actually I have a pendule, and I can measure that. And when I go over of one of this reactor, it turns counterclockwise, even if the motor here is turning clockwise, but the fields turn counterclockwise. And it's very interesting when I have the 2 on and I sit in the middle. it's very strong. It's really fascinating. It's the more strongest things I feel that now.
What do you mean by strong when you, what do you feel when you feel the fields that way, like when you're in between?
It's like a vibration in the air, and I get hot, I get sweat,
Mm-hmm.
and I can feel a vibration that goes through my body.
Mm-hmm. Lee's mentioned his feet got warm in his reactor when the reactor was going.
And it's very strong, and I play around with the hands here. Sometimes I sit down here like this. I can sit here
like how again? We're only getting we're getting like a picture every few seconds basically. So you have to move really slow and show us.
Yes.
Okay.
So I'm sitting here where I know.
Mm-hmm.
I work with my hands. I feel each ball and in the sides, on the top, in the middle, and you can feel some difference in between, from each ball to each ball. There are different in the strongness. And yeah, I have made this system here. I have actually made to give to the factory when the factory is going to be open here in Brazil, and I will donate this system to the factory, to the laboratory where we make experience. And
Mm-hmm.
I am making a smaller one also for me now. This one here.
Before you go on to that, can you tell us a little bit about the actual motors that you use?
Yes, do that. I have prepared that. That's the other one.
Okay, yeah.
And then we have here this kind of, I go slowly, that I hope you can see it. This round,
yeah.
It goes here in, and here I put the elastic things here with this.
Oh, okay. Mm-hmm.
Hanging, and it can vibrate. Actually, it was you who gave me that idea when you show you had a small car, electric car, and you put the ball on it, and it was totally unstable. But when you turn it, it gets stable.
Yes.
So I made that because I saw these motors. I have this kind of motors here.
I see. So you've done that with all the motors. They're all suspended.
It's a very cheap, it's about $5, 12 volts motor.
Right.
They say it turns 18,000 per minute, but I don't think it's going up there. And this one is broken. You can see when you hear it, it's not anymore fixed here. You can move it up, down, and inside out. And I had a heavy ball, one ball like this with two balls running on it, and without elastic, and then it broke the motor.
Yeah, it's really hard on the bearings when they're out of balance.
But now this other system is already running more than 1 week, and I have no problems with the motors. That's because they can balance.
They've been running a week solid, you mean?
Yes.
Steady. Wow.
Yeah.
And
not all the time, because at night I have to turn it off because I cannot sleep when it's on.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And also something special I got from a neighbor here. He is turning metal, and he make me this little pots to put the ping pong ball on it, and I have a hole downstairs to put on the motor. And it's very nice balance because it's made on a turning machine where you turn metal. And I asked him if he would not to produce a lot of them to sell to other people can get them also, because it's really nice. And
Yeah, it's the main linking factor between the ball and the motor, which is so
Yeah.
hard to find something that adapts. I've used plumbing parts and all kinds of odd things over the years, but to have
Yes,
something that's pre-made like that would be very nice. Yeah.
but he don't want to do it even if he would earn a good money with it. He don't like to make this work. I have to to ask 10 times that he make me some.
Right. Yeah.
Bad. I would like to have many of them and could give to other people. But this is really an important part of all, how you say, because it has to be balanced, it has to be in the middle. If
Yeah.
not, it turns bad and it breaks the motor off, and it don't work if you have a good system there.
Yeah. In plastic,
Actually,
with the
I
metal.
balls, yeah. But I had some of this kind I showed here. This is with two balls. Wait that it comes off. Yes, here. This one is a two-ball reactor. And I want to make other balls for the big system here with two balls, everyone. And I did not, I could not get the acrylic balls in December or January. It was all sell out because of Christmas. So,
Right. That's when they usually show up in the shops, is just before Christmas, and
yes.
sometimes you can't get them at other times of the year.
There is another thing I would like to talk about is here below the water pot. There is a maggraph inside the table here.
Oh,
You can just see the top. Let me take some case here. I had made my magraphs out of plastic plates, and it looks like this. The case, this is only a case. There is no, actually no coil inside yet. They come here upside on the plate, and this is just protect. And there is one inside the table, and it's a special one. It's my feeding magraph, actually, that I have made with food cans. I have all the coils I have put in food cans, and also in the three basic. Actually, I put it first in the three basic GANs and then also in the food GANs, and let it dry for some 5 to 10 times. I gave a bang and let it dry with food GANs. And I think this is this magraph is now running on 12 volts. And I have, when I connected the computer power supply that gives me 12 volt, I have also magraph on the here in below my little table is another magraph on the 110 volts. So I have 2 magraphs included. And I think this magraph on the table here, why he is with food cans, he is feeding me. Only the magraph before, when I used just the magraph, already was feeding me. So that's that was my idea. That's what I'm showing now. Any questions?
Yeah, does anyone have a question for Boris here? Let me check the...
Boris, where are you in Brazil? In Sao Paulo?
Yes, in Sao Paulo, and I'm thinking to visit you once. How far are you?
I'm in Misiones, right in the middle, in Oberá.
How many kilometers from me?
From what you call it, Iguazú Falls, de las cataratas de Iguazú, 300 kilómetros.
300 just
Yep.
from there.
From the Iguazú Falls, yes.
Ah, so it will be about 1,000 kilometers from here.
Yeah, more or less.
Yes. I will try it if I can.
John,
Sí, adelante, Fernando.
any question?
Shoot. Dispara. Ahí Fernando wants to put a question towards you.
Por favore, perguntase.
Gracias,
E comprendo español.
gracias. ¿Cuál es el propósito y el objetivo?
O propósito do aparelho que eu fiz, the propósito of this star system is, for me, it's to learn to feel fields actually and to play around, because I know it's just we don't need all that stuff actually. We have to work with our body, with our reactors. But it's a nice toy, and it helps us to start to feel the fields. Because when I started with my first McGrath, and I put the hands around, I could not feel so much. And then with time, I do it every day. I try, and with time, and now I can feel very well the fields. So
We are all learning.
yes, we are all learning. That's it. And what I want to make here, I want to try to turn different ganses to see what is going to happen. Yeah? To feel the fields, how they feel like, what they do with me. If they can, now they feed me, they give me energy. And I'm curious to know what was going on when I put food cans, 4 different food cans in each bowl, perhaps. One with date, one with avocados, one with banana, another with pimenta, and then see what's happened. That's what I wanted to do. I'm waiting for this.
Me da mucha alegría, muchas gracias por la respuesta. Y
Sí.
sé que aunque no comprendemos la misma lengua, nos entendemos en un mismo idioma.
Sim, é muito parecido português e espanhol.
Y eso es hermoso. Gracias.
Graças. I will cut off my video, get the better connection here. Are there some questions?
Boris, you're feeding off your McGrath.
Yes. Actually, the last week I have no money. I have 5 cents for 1 week. I have no food anymore, and I'm feeding myself with McGrath, just from the fields. I had made an experiment for a half a year with drinking plasma water also every day and eating very, very little. I eat it 1, 2 small breads, a coffee, sometimes nothing, perhaps once a week a little food of hot food, but less than normally. And I passed a half a year like this. It's a very nice experience also. And today I don't eat so much anymore, and I don't eat anything anymore also, because I feel that a lot of the food we eat is not going to give me energy. It takes my energy. It seems that a lot of food we eat today is no nutrition in it. And it takes more energy from my body to pass it through my body than it gives to my body. So I started to try to feel what is giving me energy and eliminate the things that is only make me fatigued, tired.
We're all experiencing the same thing as far as I gather.
Yes,
Root.
I'm sure, yes. You have done also, yes, feeding with plasma
Yeah,
water.
I've been doing this for over a year now.
Yes, in fact. I'm trying now to change and drink anymore and just to feed myself with just the pills. But I use liquid plasma a lot for, especially for health issues. No?
Yes, I produce about 70 to 80 liters a day, and I give all this away to friends.
Yes, I know. Yes.
And also, we've got to start learning how to stop breathing also.
Yes, yes.
I'm on that way also, yes.
But I don't know if I'm wrong, but I'm thinking that at the moment, when we can create our spaceship, that will all going to be happen automatically. You will be fed, you will be health, you will stop breathe. Because I think the energy inside a spaceship like this, there is all inside already.
Yes, you're quite right.
Perhaps I'm wrong, but I think that's my understanding.
So it is mine. I think we're all on the same channel.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Well, one might ask what happens when we die and stop breathing.
We get rid of our suit.
Or we maybe move into a different suit that's of a finer silk, you might say, finer ingredient.
A new dimension.
So if that's the same spaceship that we're talking about moving into by not breathing, then perhaps we should practice a bit first, then before we're subjected to death and what we call death, but that transition, let's say. So it might be a good idea to sort of practice dying, you might say. So we're not so shocked by the situation. Like right now, if you try to stop breathing, then probably you're going to end up with a problem. You're either going to have to start breathing, or you might, pass away, basically. But there are people that have learned to hold their breath for many, many minutes at a time. Deep sea divers do it, and certain, shamans and people that practice with their bodies and so on have learned to hold their breath for a very long time. There's even some instances of possibly, call it alive, or some kind of preservation of the body of a priest or shaman that's apparently been in that state for hundreds of years, but it has not been breathing and doesn't show signs of life that way, but still has not had any deterioration of the body and so on. So maybe it's possible on planet Earth, but it seems at first glance it's a tough one. How do you practice going without breath, without taking it too far?
I have practiced things like this. I have tried to make a minimum of respiration, very low, and just try to respire once a minute or once 30 seconds.
Right. Yeah.
I've been doing this for years, nearly 50 years.
Yes, I doing it also already for years before I know Keshe technology, and I used it when I had a headache or something like this to get off the
Buenas tardes. Me gustaría mencionar algo y quisiera darle las gracias a Rick.
What's that?
He wants to thank you, Rick. ¿Qué le quieres agradecer?
Por todo este trabajo enorme que él ha hecho durante toda su vida.
Sí,
Eso quiero decirle, eso.
He wants to thank you for all the work you've done during all these years. You've been at it for over 4 years, haven't you, Rick?
Yeah, it's yes.
Yo empecé contigo.
5 or 6 years that been involved with the Keshe stuff.
He's been
thank you, Rick.
for ages also.
I had a question.
Okay, that's Mark. Go ahead.
Yeah. Now our body is already feeding off the fields, right? We are getting 80% or so of our energy through the breathing, absorption through the skin, or absorption through the eyes, and so on. I wonder why the body stopped at 80%. I know you need some food to keep your digestive system running properly or something like that, but why did the body stop at 80%? And I agree with Boris, the more you eat, it seems to slow you down more. And a very nice testimonial, Boris.
I've had exactly the same experience. What's that, John? Sorry.
I find we've been educated that way. We sort of get into a panic if we stop breathing. We've got to control our panic. Don't get into a panicky way, and just live through it. Stop breathing, but don't panic. Don't get panicky, and you'll be able to do it.
Right.
Yes, you have to have be confident. How do you say?
Confident.
Believe that it works.
Confide in yourself.
You have to believe that it works. If you don't believe, it will not work. You cannot stop.
I agree with Boris.
And if you don't, and if you want to believe, you have to know how it works. That's what we learn with Keshe. He explained to us how it works, and we can understand it. And slowly, our brain can adapt it and accustom it, and with time, it gets normal, and then it starts to work. It's a process, I think. It's a learning process. Yeah.
What were you going to say?
Me gusta todo el trabajo que ha llevado la fundación a nivel internacional, y me he basado yo mucho en el trabajo de la traducción del inglés al español. Muchas gracias, Rick. Todo ese conocimiento ha sido incomparable. Realmente no sabe uno la magnitud de todo lo que las personas ahora en este momento estamos aprendiendo y conociendo. Y es enorme. Y yo te voy a decir que eres mi líder.
He's thanking you for all you've done, and you're sort of his leader. He's been following you ever since you started, and he learned what he's practicing through you.
Well, thank you, Fernando. That's good feedback. I appreciate that. It's nice to hear that things make a difference to people, and that's gratifying. Yes.
Yes, thank you, Rick.
Rick, I have 2 questions. When use amino acid and CO2 as zinc oxide, perhaps hemoglobin, no, you are connected directly of emotion, no, with your McGrath, because Boris said first I don't see very strong fear. After, because I think drinking CO2, water guns, and nano, your Boris McGrath inside is connected direct with your McGrath reactor. Mr. Keshe say when reproduce your organ and hemoglobin 1 year ago. Explain this.
Yes, I have made hemoglobin also, but I didn't put it in this reactor. I already had it in another single coil reactor.
Yes, but when you have the guns, no, you drink in the water guns.
Yes, I drink.
You are connect of everything with how connect emotion and sunlight.
Yes, it's whirling up the emotions, and I see that in myself. The questions, the important questions to change my life, they come up. They show themselves. They want to be worked out. The problems in my life, they come up and want to be worked out. I think that's an effect of zinc, I believe. And I'm thinking a lot about this, and I really going through a process with consciousness to take. You say we go to understand how things work, and so you can use that knowledge to get rid of this kind of problems. This mostly is a wrong understanding of something, or a wrong interpretation of something in your life, or in relation to somebody, mostly parents in your life or so. And all that stuff come up. You can't let it, you can't anymore go over it. You have to work it out, otherwise you don't go further, I think. I don't know, how do you feel about that? The personal psychological problems come up. Do anybody feel that?
Well, I find that, you know, since I engage with so many people around the world in the position I'm in, I see the transformations that occur and the changes in people and so on. And quite often when people encounter the teachings from the Keshe Foundation, they go through sort of a bit of a trauma, or a bit of a you know, stress time, because it does bring up all of our it brings up both our hopes and our fears at the same time.
Yes.
So we get to deal with those things, basically.
And you have to be ready to look at that things.
Yes, and it forces one to look at oneself, because the whole teaching is based on this soul-based teaching that we are the soul and the creator, or at least we can become that. We can we are that, but we don't realize it most of the time. We are not in full manifestation.
And there are also not just nice things. That's where it's difficult to look at it sometimes. You have also,
Excuse me.
especially the bad things you have to work out. Yes?
Excuse me.
Yes.
Yo soy Fernando Rendón de México y voy a decir una cosa muy sencilla y me van a entender en todos los idiomas.
What's that, Fernando?
Que la expresión del alma
Sí, sí.
es muy sencilla.
Sí.
Quiérete a ti mismo, llámate a ti mismo.
Sí.
Era tan difícil de comprender.
So, no, eu compreendo. He is saying that
Love thyself.
Huh?
The whole secret is love thyself.
Ah, yes, yes, yes.
It's a sort of a,
Yes. Parece muy sencillo. Pero muchas personas no han llegado a este punto.
Yes, I understand.
I don't understand. What's he saying?
very few people have managed to comprehend that the basic thing is love thyself.
You have to be sensible to feel. It's not, and not everybody is sensible. That's right.
With the,
I understand, right?
yes, connect with thy soul.
Comprender el aminoácido, la esencia de tu propia creación, era tan difícil.
¿Por qué? No es.
Translation, please. We have to translate as we go along. If we're going to have conversation, then we have to have the English for every single word that's said. Otherwise, I won't allow.
He told that he asked if it is difficult to connect with ourselves, with our proper amino acid. And I don't think so.
Esto no es complicado. Me disculpas y me entiendes aquí y en China. No es complicado.
This is not complicated. Anybody from China or elsewhere can comprehend this. The thing is, all people want to complicate each other or themselves. We've all got to go down to the simplest of things.
May I step in?
Yes, go ahead, Estella.
It's a language issue because the way how Fernando asked the question or he make a statement is hard to, it's not so specific and we're going around and around. Dije que de la forma que estás hablando, no haces las preguntas concretas y estás filosofiando.
La respuesta no la has entendido porque más de 1500 personas han entendido la respuesta.
No.
¿Cuál es tu pregunta?
No, yo lo que te estoy diciendo que tenés que hacer una pregunta o una...
Concreta, necesito hacer una pregunta concreta.
Claro, porque estás haciendo reflexiones y no se pueden seguir y Ricardo quiere que se tiene que traducir cada pregunta y contestación, todos se entienden.
Bien. What is your question? ¿O cuál es tu pregunta? Ándale.
Vos estás diciendo que las cosas son simples, pero nadie dijo que eran complicadas. Vos te estás contradiciendo lo que decís, porque nadie dijo que era difícil.
¿Y cuál es tu respuesta? ¿Qué quieres saber de una vez?
A Rick se le van a pelar los cables. You're not comprehending what they're saying, Rick. Fernando is sort of philosophizing, and Stella is telling him, you got to come down with a good question, something down with the brass tacks. We both gather that's what you're wanting, isn't it?
Right. He needs to ask a question and not, because otherwise we're not communicating correctly.
¿Cuál es tu pregunta? Vuelvo a repetir para darte la respuesta.
No, está preguntando a vos cuál es tu pregunta.
Hiciste una reflexión de los aminoácidos con la creencia entre lo que una persona siente sobre la esencia de uno mismo. Y Boris dijo que no es así. Él cree que es simple conectarse con uno mismo, no es un problema de los aminoácidos.
No, ya me disculpas, Estela. ¿Sí? El aminoácido es el carbono y el oxígeno, el nitrógeno y el hidrógeno. Está mencionado en el taller número 66. Necesito que me preguntes algo para darte una respuesta. No está.
Bueno, clarificar lo que vos decís, el tema de los aminoácidos, que es simple, entonces lo podemos discutir en el equipo.
Sí, no importa, pero ahora se está dando una reflexión muy interesante que no tiene nada que ver conmigo, ni lo que tú estás haciendo, ni con lo que el otro. Solamente estamos preguntando una cosa bien sencilla. Acerca de las emociones, ¿sí? Y acerca de cómo vienen esas emociones y cómo se expresa el alma.
Fernando, Rick está perdiendo el control del programa y él quiere que se traduzca todo esto. Rick, I'm saying you're losing the control of your program and you want all this translated. So you don't want any problem, do you?
Es complicado cuando no se entiende la esencia.
I'm not here to listen to philosophizing in a foreign language. This is an English broadcast. If you can't have a question or a comment that I can listen to in English, then there's no sense in continuing with this conversation. Can you translate that to him, please?
Yeah, that's what I've told him. So, Fernando, lo que Rick quiere es que este programa es en inglés y él, si no, hay que traducir todo. Queremos ir a cosas específicas y manejarlo en inglés.
Bien, solamente un punto de 1 minuto menos. Es muy sencillo.
And what do you say? Or what's going on?
He's just sort of putting his question forward, but he hasn't done so yet. ¿Qué es lo que quieres preguntar, Fernando, o decir?
Gracias, John. Es muy sencillo.
Okay, while he gets his question together, you share the screen with...
Repito 4 veces.
Put up the patent, start talking about the patent, because apparently he doesn't want to present a question and wants to philosophize or something. I don't know what he wants, but if he's not willing to cooperate, then I'm not willing to continue to listening to Spanish here for the audience. The audience already had to wait half an hour, and now we have to make them wait for English responses to Fernando. And it's taking too long to get the English translation and responses going on. I hear all kinds of conversation going on without getting the English back. So let's take it one line at a time. If he has something he wants to say, we'll translate it, and then we'll translate back and go back and forth on it. So if he has some topic that he wants to talk about, then fine. Otherwise, I'll mute him for now. So figure it out, you guys.
Muy bien,
Figure it out.
Entiendo muy bien, muchas gracias, Rick, pero es muy sencillo. Muchas gracias.
Again, what you say?
Get control of your program, Rick. He's thanking you and he's giving way to you. You taking over.
Okay, fine then. Let's have a look at change the topic here and have a look at the Keshe patent application. I thought maybe we could get a bit of refresher on that and just have a look at that as a topic, as a way that we can talk about maggrav fields or other things in terms of the patent. So just trying to get it up here. I'm not quite used to this Google patent thing here. It's a different way of looking at it than I've used before. Okay, well there, that's pretty much has it there, I guess. Let me just make sure. Okay, that's all working. Good. Okay, so this is the Keshe patent. It's not actually a patent, but a patent application. You can see it's on the right-hand side there. It says EP application. That's the European patent application. And what it is Mr. Keshe was very clever in that if this was a patent, then it would have been withdrawn due to all kinds of reasons. But because it's a patent application, then it gets to be continued on the internet and available, and people can look at it and read it and so on. Otherwise, it probably would have been a national security thing. They would have just taken it off the entire patent process. That's what they do generally with patents that are too far out there. They call it national security, and they withdraw the patent and put it under a special government process where you're not allowed to actually produce the patent. They take away your license, essentially. So because it's a patent application, it's actually got a lot of information in it. For anyone who hasn't looked at this before and you're interested in the topics of the plasma reactor group, which is what it's all about here, it's got amazing graphics, such as the picture that you see here, for example, of this is the way, this is one of the many designs of reactors. You can see some of the other ones here as well. And there's a number of drawings and pictures that are part of the whole patent process. And it's actually, let's see if I can get this full screen. There we go. Ah, that's nice. So what we see here now, for example, this is, oh, wait a minute, I don't think you can see that because of the screen share. Just a second here. In fact, I'll just share the desktop and we'll be able to see everything that comes up there. Okay, so this is the one of the pictures in the patent. And see if I can zoom that back a little bit. There, okay. So what it is the inside of a reactor, basically. And this is the Keshe plasma reactor group, and it was started specifically because of reactors just like this. And that's these are the kinds of reactors that we were initially attempting to replicate and experiment with. So you can see if you look at it here, let's magnify it again, have a look at the interior of this. You see some symbols and a bunch of dotted lines and a bunch of squiggly lines and all kinds of things going on here. And actually, let's go back a bit first.
Can I ask you a question in the graphics?
Mm-hmm.
You're looking in plan view, like if you're looking like, you know, doing a section and the reactor, and then you see, no, keep the image that you had before.
Okay.
It shows the fields and different planes and angles, like we're looking at the plan view, right, from the top, and then you have a 90-degree rotation from the plan view, and then you have you see where is the H? You have a field with this 90-degree to what would be the plan view.
Mm-hmm.
And then there is another diagram like 45 degrees. But
Mm-hmm.
so it looks like 3 planes of 3 different reactors within one location.
Well, like for example, the one with the H that you mentioned with these almost horizontal lines, or what would you call them?
Concentric rings.
Yes, concentric rings that looks like a disc. They actually line up with the other concentric rings that are concentric to the plane.
Right.
With the of the thing, you see where the intersection points line up.
Yeah.
So we get both views basically. So if you look back at the plan view, as we call it, the flat view here, this shows the layers of the gases. This is the idea.
Yeah, that's the field strength of each gas. It's in a circle, and because they are different potents or different field strengths, they have different radius. They are, you know, the diameters are different, right?
Yeah, it's actually even more basic than that, because what happens is when you spin this reactor, we're looking at it as a flat thing, but it's actually a sphere. And if you rotate that sphere, then what happens is you get a separation of the gases. And these gases were specifically introduced into this reactor for their qualities, for their specific qualities that each gas has that needs to be in the reactor. So you have hydrogen, which is the lightest, and it is at the center of the core. And then helium and neon and argon. And you could also have radon, for example, which is even heavier. These gases are going in basically in their atomic weight. So the heavier gas is toward the outside and the lighter gas is at the center. And when you rotate these gases, then they separate into basically like spheres or layers. So that's the interesting thing about this reactor. You essentially have like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 or 6 reactors in a way, or cores of the reactor, because of each layer of gases ends up being like a separate shield or separate reactor in a way. So for example, between the helium and neon, that's quite a big jump in density, and you would have a definite gradient there, a definite like Coulomb barrier between the helium and the neon, and same between the neon and argon. Argon's quite a bit heavier than neon, and and so on with the different gases. So when they're separated, they become special in that you get to use the properties of each gas. So for example, if you have ignition in the center of this thing, which is, you see this, the very center is like the core of this unit where the energy is, that's where the principal energy is in these reactors. So it emits from the core of the reactor. But then you need gases around that central emitting core in order to transform the fields to lower the field strength, essentially, the same as our atmosphere lowers the field strength of the sun's rays as it comes through the atmosphere, and it blocks and transforms some of those rays into new elements, and it blocks the ultraviolet rays. The atmosphere, blocks that, so we end up not being fried on the surface from the ultraviolet rays that normally would be subject to if it wasn't for the atmosphere. So in essence, this reactor creates an atmosphere around the core. That's a special atmosphere that transforms the energy in a definite manner. And each of these gases does a specific job in that transformational process. And that's part of the squiggly lines you see here, which are different fields that are interacting and whatnot. And we also have some rotating magnets in this particular design, those little black things at the center there, that little sort of egg-shaped black things are magnets or magnetic fields, at least, that are at the core of this. So you can see that in this picture on the right here as well, upper right, with the north-south tiny little magnets that are illustrated there as part of this rotating core, rotating pin at the center. Okay, so this gives sort of a rough idea on that. And then if we look a bit into the patent here, it actually describes the process quite well. I'll just read the paragraph here. I'll just mute you, Estella. There's some background noise when I'm talking here. You can unmute yourself when you need to speak again there. I just like to read the abstract here, which
That's
is,
not me.
okay, it's the only microphone that was open, but maybe something else was going on. Okay, so let me just read the abstract here. It says, the new method and technology is described to create under centrifugal and vacuum conditions, in the presence of an ionization condition, a turbulence, rotation, compressive, and heating of a gaseous matter is created in a reactor by at least one central rotative magnetic field, with the purpose of creating plasmatic conditions leading to the creation of various magnetic fields, where at least the interaction of two magnetic fields will lead to the creation of at least one gravitational force phenomenon. In a reactor embodiment, a chain of energetic events is created via a rotative magnetic initiation of a basic ionization of a gas, i.e. hydrogen, which then triggers a controllable chain of energy transfers, scintillation, to the next following layers of introduced gases, such as helium, neon, argon, krypton, and xenon. of all other introduced elements of the periodic table, such as lithium, beryllium, potassium, calcium, titanium, platinum, etc., and or their introduced molecule combinations, such as a vapor. A central column has magnetic means to start the process. Various concepts, applications, and products are disclosed, such as space travel and atomic welding. Okay, so what this is, this gravitational energy system, is basically the core reactor for the space travel, for the spaceship in some kind of physicality. That is, you know, we have to come to the idea that do we want to go to space, first of all? And if we do want to go to space, do we take a spaceship, or do we use our own body spaceship? In other words, do we go there as a sort of a soul-based or visualization process, or do we go there and actually take our bodies with us to space, which might be an interesting way to go as well. So, and also this idea of transportation with these reactors is not limited to space at all as well. It would radically change the method of transportation on this planet as far as that goes too. So yeah,
I haven't seen that term before. Atomic welding. What does that mean?
Well, atomic is the atoms, and welding is allowing atoms to come together, to weld together. So in that case, you can imagine creating new elements from, you know, welding a copper atom to a zinc atom or something like that, and actually having them form one atom out of the combination of you know, protons and neutrons and so on, in the protons, neutrons, and electrons. It would
new materials.
Yeah, creating new materials by transmutation of elements rather than chemical combinations of elements and other kinds of ways and means.
I find he's sort of pushing the concept of forgetting about matter state, sort of think of the field state in which you got a point of amalgamation between one metal and the other. And if we think of it as a matter state, we're thinking of a mixture. But in a field state, you've got a transition state between the two metals, which would be the welding. But how can he sort of put this new concept into this paper if he doesn't put it this way? It's sort of shocking for anybody who's only thinking of a matter state.
Yes, well, I can read a little bit about that. It's an interesting idea here. He talks about, in the very beginning of the patent, he talks about what's happened previously when, you know, with the tokamak reactors in the world of nuclear industry and so on, and how they've been trying for, well, more than 50 years to create fusion, these fusion reactors. And the scientists keep saying, well, the fusion reactors are just 20 years away. I remember when I was a small child, and that was a long time ago, that's what that was about 50 years ago when they started saying this, that fusion reactors, yes, they are possible, but they're difficult, and we predict it'll be at least 20 years away. And another 20 years go by, and they predict it'll be, well, about 20 years away. Another 20 years go by, and it's the same thing again. So Mr. Keshe talks about that in this patent, and the reason for the failure of these reactors is rooted in the following three major miscalculations. And he mentions the reactors all suffer from the central column syndrome. That is to say that these all have a center solid body right in the middle of the reactor. This is to facilitate the physical loops of the magnetic coil rings so that the magnetic fields can be produced and maintained to bring the plasma to the right temperature and speed in order to achieve fusion. So he's talking about the current reactors, the way they're designed. And he says this is a fundamental problem if the scientists are trying to imitate and reach the temperature of the center of the sun. As when has anyone seen a central column in the center of the sun? So the second miscalculation he mentions is the fundamental reversal of the laws of physics. If one looks at the magnetic field forces in the universe, the magnetic force is created and maintained from the center outwards in any star in possession of a fusion core. In these man-made designs, the laws of physics are turned inside out, where the magnetic fields are enforced from the outside inward. This is an explanation as to why the scientists are using so much energy for such a small output. Our view: the magnetic field force has to be created and maintained from the inner part to radiate out, and thus allowing creation of the second magnetic field force inwards to contain the plasma within the center of the core. Okay, and goes on to say miscalculation 3. The current concepts of the fusion production and maintenance lack a source of gravitational field forces like the one in the center of the sun. Our view: the secret of the sun in holding together all the elements that can sustain fusion is the existence of a massive gravitational field force at its core. What this means is that the center of the sun possesses and maintains a very high level gravitational field force that can hold on to the plasma of its massive body. This gravity around the center of the sun is calculated to be in the order of hundreds and thousands of times more powerful than the gravitational force on the surface of the sun. Okay, so then he talks about the tokamak reactors, and if one asks the men in charge of the latest fusion experiments in the UK, they all report the gravity in the reactor core to be a fraction of the gravitational force on the surface of the Earth. It's primarily due to the fact that there is no system devised to create and maintain a gravitational field force to hold the plasma in the reactor core and pull it together. If this was or could be achieved, there would be not a need for such a large input of current to create the magnetic field force from outside coils. So how can a nuclear fusion reactor maintain its power without the existence of a gravitational field force? This is like baking a sponge cake without having any flour or egg in the dough. How can one achieve fusion when they do not possess the main ingredient to hold the plasma together to sustain the fusion? When these problems are understood and rectified by the scientists, they may then use these forces and materials appropriately as in the universe. And then he mentions the other big problem is the 100 million degrees centigrade temperatures that they try to create in the tokamak reactors, and how it melts the equipment and so on. And he goes on to say, nor do we see the correct approach in patent applications by other inventors. So the method which is claimed in this patent application is such that under centrifugal and vacuum conditions, a turbulence, rotation, compressive, and heating of a gaseous matter is created in a reactor by at least one central rotative magnetic field with the purpose of creating plasmatic conditions leading to various physical phenomena. We claim also a method where, under centrifugal and vacuum conditions in presence of an ionization condition, a turbulence, rotation, compressive, and heating of a gaseous matter is created in a reactor by at least one central rotative magnetic field with the purpose of creating plasmatic conditions leading to the creation of various magnetic fields, where at least the interaction of two magnetic fields would lead to the creation of at least one gravitational force phenomenon. So this is two claims, actually, two methods here. So he's talking about creating the plasmatic conditions which lead to various physical phenomena, and creating the plasmatic conditions which lead to the interaction of two magnetic fields which lead to the creation of at least one gravitational force phenomenon. And he goes on to give the analogy of the planets and the positioning of the planets in our solar system, and about the cores of the planets, and all of that gets explained here. And then he goes on to get into some of the other details about the actual scintillation process and the materials that are inside of the reactor and how they interact. And this is actually the part that I wanted to get into more, but I'm worried about I might be losing our audience here a bit, and I want people to catch up if they need to, if there's any questions or comments at this point. Do you understand basically what's going on inside a reactor like we've seen here, or what's trying to be achieved? Basically the creation of the fields like we saw. Let's see, where was it? In our picture section here. So this is another. Go ahead.
Rick, in this picture, where do we see the two magnetical fields creating the gravitational field?
Okay, well, this example here, it's got an inner and outer core to it, and Let's see, I'm not clear. Let me see, have a look
Is
at
that
it.
your understanding? There's two, I thought that's what we just read, where the two magnetical fields interact and create a gravitational field.
Yes, well, the idea is at least the interaction of two magnetic fields. So at least two magnetic fields, which lead to the creation of the one gravitational force phenomena. So how are those two magnetic fields created? Well, he talks about creating them from the central rotative magnetic field, and that creates the plasmatic conditions leading to the creation of the other magnetic fields, which lead to the creation of the gravitational force. So the interaction between, for example, when we look at the patent again here, and you would have an introduced magnetic field from that rotating central column deal there, or some other. It shows as a rotating column, but it may not be an actual column. It may be just a rotating magnetic field, because he mentions that due to temperature issues, that you wouldn't want to have a central column, basically. But he put it in as an indication of a rotating magnetic field. So you have one field there, and then in the when the hydrogen is ionized and initiated through the processes that trigger the plasma inside the core of the reactor, then that starts creating its own magnetic fields as well. And the interaction between the created magnetic fields is what creates the gravitational field. So we can have a look at a couple of the other designs here, maybe to get some clues out of it. Let me see what's different here.
And the spinning doesn't necessarily dictate whether it's magnetical or gravitational, or does it? The direction of the rotation that the arrows go.
Yeah, I'm not sure if that's so critical. I haven't seen that in the patent as far as the direction of rotation so much. But we do get, for example, it shows here the magnetic field. So the MF1 would be magnetic field 1. And then we have, like, for example, in this picture, we have the two magnetic fields. We have MF1 in the central core that's being generated around the hydrogen. And we have MF2, which is including the helium, neon, argon, and xenon, or other gases that are inside the core. So in this case, you'd have an interaction between the central magnetic field and the outer magnetic field. That gives you the two fields that interact. And I believe they are created from that rotating core, which I'm not sure if that's indicated as the MF1, or if the rotating core is separate and generates the MF1 and MF2 fields from its interaction with the gases. And you can have a look at another picture of that. Let's see this one. Again, we see an MF1 and MF2 for magnetic field 1 and magnetic field 2. And in this case, the MF1 includes the hydrogen, helium, and neon. Up to, it looks like neon is the Coulomb barrier, some part of the neon. And then the argon and other heavier gases on the outer part of the core would be the MF2 in this case. So, and we can see that if you look on the right-hand picture, I think it's called the, like, is it 14A, or it's hard to see the labeling there, but you have an inner core and an outer core created from the gases. And that's like a natural separation. And that interface between the gases is actually quite an interesting place, because that's where the interface between gases is where there's a transition, and that's where the fields will tend to transmute into a different energy level. Same as the interface between water and air. It's an interesting interface where there's a lot of things occur. That's where the amino acids form, right? In our CO2 boxes, is on the surface of the water, surface of the liquid. So that that interface between well, in this case, I was talking about air and water, but essentially they're two fluids. So air is a fluid as well. And in this case of the reactor, we have these various fluids, and they have an interface between each other. And when the fields go through from that activated core, the high energy fields, and very intense, powerful rays, they get transformed through the action of the gases. And for example, neon is known to light up, so it would tend to produce some sort of light effect between the interacting fields.
So the gravitational fields are trying to pull the energy from the magnetic fields? I'm thinking of like the intestines and the blood vessels, where the transfer of energy goes back and forth. The intestines being magnetical and the blood vessels being gravitational.
Yes, but nothing is entirely gravitational or entirely magnetical. Everything is a balance of the fields. They can't have just fields that are incoming and out. Like the fields are, rather than looking at it as either magnetical or gravitational, it's more of whatever is in excess of or overbalancing the other is what we generally see. So it's, but the fields of, there's no mag without the grav, and no grav without the mag. Basically, it's the way it works in the universe. So I think it's dependent on the exact way you're looking at it and the circumstances and so on and so forth.
Sure.
It's kind of like the thing of, if you were to eat lemon juice, for example, it's just very acidic, but inside the body it creates an alkaline reaction. So that's kind of one of those bizarre things. So is the lemon juice, when it's inside the body, is it acidic or alkaline?
I had heard that before. Same thing.
The mind starts to fry, because it's creating an alkaline reaction. So how can it be considered acidic inside the body? So suffice to say that the processes going on are plasmatic processes that are going on. It's a little hard to define sometimes, I think, in terms of gravitational or magnetical. So you were saying, again, Mark, how are you comparing? The intestines were gravitational?
Well, yeah, it's trying to give off energy, and the blood is trying to pick up the energy, being gravitational. That was in one of the teachings, something like that. So I was thinking the magnetical is giving off the energy, but then yet at the same time there's a compression and an expansion. So there's this like accordion thing going on.
Well, that's right. Yes, and that's true in the universe. It's always expanding and contracting at the same time with these entities. So you can imagine with a rotating sphere that there, and with a heavy gas on the outer part of the sphere, like beyond the argon into heavier gases, the heaviest gases, let's say. That creates a gravitational field in itself. It's a dense kind of that's where if it was a circus ride, that sphere, and you were inside of it, if you were on the inside of that sphere, you would feel strong forces on the outer rim, on the inside of the outer rim of that sphere. But at the very core of the sphere, similar to a merry-go-round, if you're at the middle of the merry-go-round, you don't feel the forces nearly as much as the kids on the outside spinning around. So you can imagine that outside part of the merry-go-round is a strong gravitational field. It's hard to hang on because you're being if there was a wall there, you'd be pushed up against it. That's why I was thinking of there's a circus ride where you stand up and this whole circular thing starts rotating, and then it goes up on an angle and you stay stuck to the wall because of the rotation. It provides a gravitational force that keeps you in place, even though you're basically upside down whipping around with this thing. So in a similar way, the gases on the outside would tend to be in like a gravitational field. Essentially, it's pretty easy, even with a few thousand RPM, to create many hundreds of G's forces, many hundreds of times more than the gravitational force of the Earth inside of a rotating sphere like that. So you're creating conditions as if it was on the planet Jupiter, or perhaps even in the sun itself, that degree of gravity, which Mr. Keshe mentions in the patent, is one of the key things that they're missing in the patent, was that whole idea of the gravitational. There has to be something gravitational that holds things together at the same time as the magnetical that's pushing out the fields.
You see those arrows going around like that. See, I was thinking that where the head of the arrows is, that's either a gravitational or a magnetical ray, but the plasma has both. No matter whether it is gravitational or magnetical, it still has both.
Well, that's the thing about it. If you look at it, instead of gravitational or magnetical, if we look at it as having basically an in and an out, an incoming and outgoing fields, and all plasmas have incoming and outgoing fields. So this is the thing about it, that if they're outgoing, we consider them magnetical. If they're incoming, they're gravitational. And so some entities may be more gravitational, some may be more magnetical, but they still have both in terms of the way it's set up is you have you know, the ingoing and outgoing fields, and inlet and outlet, the two poles of the fields, basically north and south, or what we consider north and south.
Thank you.
Okay, are there any other comments or questions on this? See if I can, just trying to bring up the patent again here. So a big part about this whole patent thing and about this reactor is the idea of scintillation. So can anyone tell me what scintillation is? What does that mean? Scintillation, you see the word here. Scintillation, very important idea, actually.
Yeah, scintillation is sort of an explosion of light, of energy that is produced when this interaction takes place.
Yeah, essentially, or at least an energy transfer. It may generally we consider it if it's visible or shows up, then it's scintillation. Yeah, and so it's considered triggering a controllable chain of energy transfers. So when you have this, hydrogen is initiated through the magnetic initiation of the ionized hydrogen, that gets transferred to the other layers of gases. It's a controllable chain of energy transfers, because it's hard to handle that hydrogen. Like it's mentioned, it's very high temperature. So that's why these other gases are around it. They end up basically acting as kind of a buffer system, you might say. So you look at that again. See the,
Are they tickling each other?
tickling each other. That's probably a good way to put it. Probably having a lot of fun in there. Mr. Keshe said he prayed to his reactors before he would start them up, and these kinds of reactors. And he said he might start them, you know, hundreds of times a day in new settings and so on. And he would pray to them by saying, he prayed to the entities in the reactors by saying, I hope you're going to have as much fun with this as I am. And so he just gave a blessing that the entities of this reactor would have fun with it. And I think they would have fun if they're lighting up and there's all kinds of interactions going on. It's a living plasma. It's a soup of plasma. You have to understand that it's a different environment when you create a vacuum environment and have ionized gases, which are much easier to ionize in a vacuum environment. Then that is much closer to the natural conditions of space. We don't normally see ionized gases, and that level of energy on planet Earth. If we do, we say that we've been hit by lightning, because that's the kind of energy levels that the ionized, gases on Earth. That's where we would see an ionized gas is in a lightning bolt, for example, and maybe in the plasma of a candle or something like that. You could say was ionized gases as well, but not like a ionized hydrogen plasma that we're talking about here, and give off a lot of energy. Pardon me?
Rick, we're seeing it in the Aurora Borealis and Australis.
Oh, that's a good example of ionized gases. We also see that in Canada, up in northern Canada. It's quite extreme in that way.
And it's also been detected when the sperm gets into the egg, you have a sort of an explosion of light.
Yes, I've heard about that. And some say it might even, I think it's associated with the potassium, I believe, in the, or was it the
zinc and the potassium,
zinc, either zinc or zinc and potassium.
Because everybody thinks of the matter state. They're not synthesized or synthesized into the field effects and the fields we're looking into.
Right, and these ionized gases, they have strong fields. That's the thing about it. Like if you take an ordinary, atom, then the fields may not extend that far. But if you take that atom and remove the electron and put it in a vacuum environment where suddenly it's able to open up and expand itself and rotate very easily and exist in that condition without being impinged upon by other big heavy molecules that are interfering with its ability to initiate itself, to essentially like catch on fire, to initiate the plasma. And it requires that vacuum environment, because we can still do it and create plasmas in atmospheric conditions and so on, but it's much easier in a vacuum environment. That's why you see the aurora borealis, like you're talking about, the northern lights, or I guess they call them the southern lights where you are.
Yeah, that's Australis. Borealis up north and Australis down south.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And if you look at the videos, live videos from the ISS, you see the Borealis, the way it normally is within the atmosphere, but suddenly you got explosions trespassing the atmosphere and going right into space.
Yeah, it's up in the upper atmosphere too, which is more or less a vacuum environment. It's very thin air. That's what it's known for. It's hard to breathe, even at 10,000 or 5,000 or 6,000 feet or 10,000 feet altitude. Starts to get difficult to breathe and whatnot because of the lack of the oxygen.
The plane pilots have also detected when you got lightning, you sort of see a flash of lightning going outwards. That's a similar effect also detected by these pilots.
And they get plasma balls and what's called sprites and this kind of thing that are above the clouds, which are interacting as well, that sometimes the pilots get to see. So suffice to say that outside of the atmosphere and gravity of Earth, it's a much more interesting environment for interactions to take place between specifically ionized gases and ionized elements that might happen to be in space. So it's definitely interesting to look at it. Mr. Keshe, for example, has mentioned once or twice or several times the idea of a single hydrogen atom when it's in space. The fields of that atom could extend out a cubic meter around, like in a meter radius around that atom. And it's kind of an interesting idea, because if there is at least one hydrogen atom in every cubic meter, then that means the fields of one hydrogen atom are connected with the fields of the next hydrogen atom, which is connected to the fields of the next hydrogen atom. And essentially, because there are at least one hydrogen atom in every cubic meter of space, there's no such thing as a perfect vacuum. And essentially, all these hydrogen atoms are in connection with their fields through the entire universe. And that's a pretty big idea when you think about it. And that may mean that they're basically in instant communication, so that according to the quantum way of looking at the universe, something that affects a hydrogen atom on the other end of the universe, we might be able to tune into it at this end of the universe and actually know instantly what's going on at that other end. Once we have the signature, the address of that other spot, then basically we can tune in and get the information from that. If you look at what's his name, Nazim Haramein, and his teachings, which are quite interesting on various aspects of the electric universe and plasma, and he's the toroid is his favorite geometric shape, and so on. He talks about the proton, which is the hydrogen atom, that each one is individual, each one is unique. It has its own signature, its own unique properties, and the signature of each hydrogen atom will be defined by such things as its position, exact position in the universe, its strength, and according to the various factors, maybe including its how old it is, and so on. And that the universe, there's actually an entire universe inside of every hydrogen atom that's as big as the universe is to us, that when we look out and see our galaxies and so on, and we're amazed at these trillions and trillions of stars that are out there, and how enormous it is, and how varied it is, and how each one's different, and so on. If we were to look inside of a hydrogen atom, that we would attain basically that same vision of this entire universe inside. And each hydrogen atom would have a similar but different universe inside of itself, each one unique to that particular atom. And more as we, as scientists, investigate more and more into the smaller and smaller, what they call particles, which are basically maggrav fields, wound up maggrav fields. And they look inside of those, what they call particles or fields, and they find smaller and smaller particles and more of them. And it starts to get to be a confusing picture after a while. What is a particle? What is a field? What is a virtual particle? And all of this kind of thing. And it's quite an amazing time, actually, when we can think of something that we considered like the proton, the basic building block of the universe, found in every element in the atomic structure of every element. And here it is, suddenly thinking of them as being individuals, that they're each tiny little atom in that tiny little proton, or even the electron could be considered the same, has a vast world inside of itself. It's what a concept that is, and that it could extend as much as in a scalar way, as much as the scale of us going from planet Earth to solar system to Milky Way galaxy, and to all galaxies of the universe, and then all the universes within the cosmos, and so on and so forth. It's a pretty big idea, I think, because we've considered the proton to be the end game for a long time. That was the smallest thing we could measure, smallest particle. It was the basic building block, and that was supposed to be it when I was small. But now things have changed, and it's more of a flux, and much more of a scalar. It's much more on a bigger scale than what was expected. So we live in interesting times that way. Thank you, Jay. He says, every time I hear you say his name, you get better at it. I'll never get it correct. Okay, let me see. I'm just looking at the chat here. Jay says, Rick, can you explain how all the gases get in the reactor? Are they all in separate internal globes, or all just thrown in at the same time? Well, this is part of what's called the loading of the reactor. So you might introduce gases into the core as it's rotating, for example, and you could introduce the heaviest gases first, and that would produce an insulating layer on the outer part of the rotating core. And then you introduce the lighter and lighter gases that build up these layers and leave the central area, a vacuum area, ready for the hydrogen to be put in. And then usually, actually, I believe Mr. Keshe indicates in the patent here that the helium is a special form called scintillated helium, which is activated when it's put into the reactor, and that helps jumpstart the reaction. There's an early video showing, I believe it's a Chinese team that's loading their reactor, and they attempted to scintillate the helium using an alpha radiation source. So some radioactivity is involved with these reactors, but they don't produce radioactive byproducts, which is the beauty of it. Most reactors have radioactive byproducts. Okay, what else? Let me see here. Oh, yeah, the gases are basically injected in through a pipe system. You can see, let's have a look at that a little bit. Loop system. See if I can find that here. Let me see. Oh, there it is, that one. If you look at this reactor, this is it's just a schematic, but it gives the idea. This label at the top here, oops, the 15B, 15A's, 15D, 15E, and 15C, and so on. These are various gases that are introduced. And so you'd have a system with pipes and so on and valves that, and you allow only very, very tiny amounts of the gases are required. So you have to have some precise way of measuring the gases so you don't reduce the vacuum condition too far. So the idea is to vacuum out the reservoir, the sphere gets vacuumed, like we're talking about very high vacuum. Some of these experiments might take days to vacuum out the container with a very expensive high-tech vacuum system going into extreme vacuum conditions similar to space. Then once you have the vacuum condition, that's when you introduce the gases, and they have to be highly pure gases that are introduced in the correct amounts to give the ratios that are needed. Mr. Keshe mentions the ratios further on in the patent as well. What else about that? Yeah, there's some of the reactors have a different internal globe. So you can have a 2-core reactor or you can have a single core reactor. This reactor, for example, shows a 2-core reactor. You can see the outer lines here. And what else about that? Let me see here. So this is there's a lot of really good information in here in this patent actually, and it gives everything you need to know to create your reactor and make it work according to the ideas that are presented in here. Talks about different ways of control and initial mechanical rotation at 3000 RPM and or electromagnetic triggered rotation. The internal rotation 50 will be continued due to the interaction of the magnetic fields involved in a self-sustained process. And that's the idea. Once this gets going, it becomes a self-sustaining process where you don't need to rotate the reactor or add energy to it or anything like that. And like I say, this patent goes on and on and on with so many details. It talks about generating heat, about generating cooling, generating magnetic fields and gravitational fields, and about the planets, the way the planets work, and one of the important ideas here, as I go on to some more details about this for those who need to know, I guess it's sort of in this paragraph, it says, at the present, most considerations are given to the use of ionized hydrogen and its relation with extreme ultraviolet rays emissions. This is very important, actually. We were looking into this in the first plasma reactor groups with extreme ultraviolet emissions. There's a very specific extreme ultraviolet which activates the hydrogen, and this is true in space and will be true in this reactor. So the idea is to create this extreme ultraviolet and have that be your means of activating the plasma. Mentions here is that where it has been observed in the galaxies that the ground state of hydrogen receiving energy photons in the extreme ultraviolet rays range would and is excited to be ionized. So essentially the extreme ultraviolet rays knock off the electron from the hydrogen atom and ionize it, making it a proton, a positively charged proton. Then by returning to ground state through catalysis, it can be used to release this energy to heat up the surrounding gas to a heated plasma state. So the hydrogen gets activated, gets excited, they call it excited, and then when it returns back to the ground state, that's when it releases this excess energy. And that's when we notice things lighting up and heating up. Is when it's released again, not when it's activated and excited, but when it goes back to the ground state. So this opening a new approach into development of systems where not ionized but natural hydrogen and atomic hydrogen can be used to generate energy and currents by using extreme ultraviolet rays rather than ultraviolet rays to create the ionization. This new understanding allows a low temperature operation and less energy input for the higher energy output, allowing operation in the non-nuclear environment. And this being due to the fact that as natural hydrogen is used, there is no possibility of emission above the extreme ultraviolet rays by the hydrogen atoms, as an atom cannot emit more than it has absorbed. That is, as the extreme ultraviolet rays energy absorbed by the natural hydrogen atom, this atom to return to the ground state can only release energies below the extreme ultraviolet rays, at the same time releasing sufficient energy and free electrons that can be useful in the system. For this reason, the need for a new ignition system, I repeat, using extreme ultraviolet rays for hydrogen rather than ionization by ultraviolet rays microwave can be considered. And he goes on to say, by passing liquid helium over alpha or beta source to generate the extreme ultraviolet rays, Thorndike in the late 1950s discovered a liquid helium scintillation. Stockton later showed the emission of very intense wavelength range in the extreme ultraviolet rays spectrum is centered at around 80 nanometers. That's the wavelength of the ultraviolet, extreme ultraviolet that we're interested in. Adams confirmed the transparency of liquid helium to its own scintillation light is the reason for the intensity of the photons. So this liquid helium gives off this extreme intensity of photons, and due to its own transparency, makes it an ideal substance to use inside the reactor to start this scintillation process. And it goes on to talk about that and how to do that. And he mentions this method of ionization of the hydrogen atoms has been observed in the galaxies, and therefore it should be easy to achieve the same in the reactor environment under the right condition. Extreme ultraviolet rays in a vacuum condition cause prompt and direct photoionization of hydrogen. That's probably one of the most important statements in this whole patent. I'll say it again. The extreme ultraviolet rays in a vacuum condition cause prompt and direct photoionization of hydrogen. So this use of extreme ultraviolet ray is the fast and direct way to start the reactor from cold. So this is basically the way to jumpstart the reactor. These kind of reactors, at least, is through the use of the extreme ultraviolet as a mechanism. And it goes on to say the right choice of radioactive element for the production of extreme ultraviolet rays in the presence of liquid helium or neon is important. With the correct selection, the possibility that liquid helium will carry any gamma ray energy level radiation into the core of the reactor can be totally eliminated. So what he's saying is to use a certain energy level of scintillator, and that carries that energy into the core of the reactor. And you don't want any higher energy levels in the core of the reactor because you end up with radioactive components. But if you choose properly, then you end up with that irradiation source will it will not carry dangerous levels of radiation coming from the core of the reactor. He also mentions to make sure no neutrons can enter the Caroline core that can create high energy rays in the core. So you don't want these high energy rays creating a radioactive chain of events and releasing X-rays or higher level energy rays with the interaction of other materials in the core. Okay, so it seems to be important. And he goes on to to describe the way the gases work in the vacuum environment and the way the centrifugal force works, and he mentions, for example, for this system to be able to take advantage of the above criterion, it is important to have hydrogen in atomic, molecular, its isotopes, and ionized form are the primary elements in production of the initial heating of the reactor core, as it is done in the cosmos. So he keeps mentioning this is the way it's done in the universe. So we would be well advised to study up more on the way the interactions of hydrogen in its natural environment in space, because that will give us big clues as to how to create our reactor in a similar basis. It says hydrogen gas in atomic and molecular level has some versatile properties that, if they are used for the right purpose at the right time in the right combination, this element will provide and facilitate most of the needs of the system's energy creation requirement for all application. And goes on to say that, well, it's all important, so I'm going to read it. In this patent, the systems are developed that makes it possible for the first time that it does not matter in which form the hydrogen is made available in the core of the system. The primary condition can be created in the core of the vacuum centrifuge chamber that brings about the desired effect in any system to create the initial heat for the onset of chain of events that will lead on to the creation of heat in vast amounts, electric current in predetermined large quantities, single magnetic field condition in a molecular level in and around the core of the reactor, creation of double magnetic field in the molecular level, which the interaction of two magnetic fields will lead to the creation and control of gravity in the center of the system for the first time. Creation of gravity, MT Keshe. So that's a pretty important statement there. Now this is like, that was just all one sentence. That whole paragraph was one sentence, and it's pretty hard to follow, I think, if you were just to read it for the first time. I've read it many times now, so it does actually make sense to me. I'll read it one more time because I think it's important to try to connect this together. In this patent, systems are developed that makes it possible for the first time that it does not matter in which form hydrogen is made available in a core of the system. The primary condition can be created in the core of the vacuum centrifuge chamber that brings about the desired effect in any system to create the initial heat for the onset of a chain of events that will lead on to the creation of heat in vast amount, electric current in predetermined large quantities, single magnetic field condition in molecular level in and around the core of the reactor, creation of double magnetic field in the molecular level, which the interaction of two magnetic fields will lead to the creation and control of gravity in the center of a system for the first time. Creation of gravity, MT Keshe. So, are people following me a bit here so far, or have I lost everybody? You've all gone to sleep.
We're just laymen.
Well, yes.
Listening to you attentively.
And this information comes from a nuclear engineer, so that's a bit to be expected as far as having some learning ramp here that we need to learn the terms and what's going on. But I mean, basically, this is the interaction of fields that Mr. Keshe has been teaching and talking about for years. So it's all available in the patent.
Right. He's been working with this for 40 years. I'm seeing words for the first time in my life.
Well, that's right.
On the screen.
But what I'm saying is the patent's been available for the last 5 years or something like that. And, you know, you can read it any time. And it may take many readings of the patent to start to get it. When I first read it, I got parts of it, but most of it I just sort of skipped over because I couldn't get my head around it. It was just too many words that I didn't know, too many ideas that were trying to be introduced and so on. But if you keep kind of going at it, try to extract the ideas that you need for your development, because everyone who reads this patent will get something different out of it, according to their level of education and their level of understanding, their level of their being, and so on. And I believe that anyone who can read can get something out of this patent. Something will click for them.
Sure. This is all knowable. It's just that it takes, I'm a slow learner, but when I get it very well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that's the thing. It could take time, and you know, just going through this patent again here, I'm getting lots of little revelations and things that I go, oh yeah, I forgot about that. That's so important. You know, this thing of the extreme ultraviolet, what they call it, EUV, extreme ultraviolet, EUV, is actually a very big topic in space. And the discovery of EUV in space has transformed their ideas on what is possible to be happening out in space with the transmutations of elements and this kind of thing that's going on.
It's a big problem they have after the Van Allen belt. Too much radiation.
Yes, right. And you know, we think of space being dark and, you know, cold and that's it, but it's actually it's so intense, it's so concentrated in radiation that you know, we would be susceptible to it if we didn't have a spaceship that had skins on it that protected against radiation, and special shields and on the helmets and special spacesuits and all that kind of thing. And even then, many of the astronauts end up with eye problems with what do you call it?
Cataract.
Cataracts. Right. That's right. From the cosmic rays and whatnot. And when they're out in space, they sometimes see flashes of light in their eyes, and that's the cosmic, you know, gamma rays and other powerful rays that are essentially hitting the amino acids directly in the eyeball. It could be coming from any direction, not necessarily through the lens of your eyes. It could be coming through the back of the brain and hitting the amino acids of the eye and producing a flash of light in her brain.
Yeah, that's the scintillation. You also get it with these water tanks they use for detecting the neutrinos.
Mm-hmm.
They make enormous water tanks down in the earth to detect those neutrinos going right through the earth.
Yes, right. We're hit with the billions of these neutrinos in every square centimeter of our skin and our body, and yet they just pass through us and essentially don't even interact with our atoms in our body, because the atoms are too big to the neutrinos. They just they see an atom every few kilometers basically, and you know, they don't even bother hitting the atoms because they're so sparse on that level.
Yeah.
From their point of view, it's like an ant and an ant trying to run into a beach ball on a beach. There's probably little chance that the ant's going to actually run into the beach ball and an entire beach. And it's like that for a neutrino trying to find its way through the atoms of a molecule or of an element. To a neutrino, all the protons would look really far spaced apart, very sort of tiny and spaced apart. There wouldn't be a chance at all that they'd be able to hit one of them very easily. So that's why these neutrinos pass straight through the entire Earth, most of them. And if they put a big bunch of water, and what is it? I think it's heavy water that they use as well, like a giant swimming pool essentially. And then they set up detectors to detect these neutrinos when one of them actually might hit one of the atoms in the water. I think they get like a hit a week or something like that. There's a lot of wait time in that job. You have to have a lot of patience in neutrino hunting.
Now, oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say that Joseph here mentions the GANS reactors are easier to build and to experiment with. That's right. And they're also of lower energy field levels, so we don't get hurt with them as easily as well. There's less chance of creating nuclear byproducts and having rays go out and causing, you know, damage to flesh and that kind of thing. And they're definitely easier to build, but just because something's easy doesn't necessarily mean it does the job properly.
Yes, but it's better for us all, because I think only science groups with vast amount of money can rebuild these gas reactors and bring that to function.
Yes, that's right. It requires specialized equipment and specialized knowledge, and you know, it's kind of, in a way, it's good that someone in their garage can experiment with that kind of thing. But in another way, it's probably better that it's under a more contained environment and with someone that's got the full knowledge on what they're doing with that situation. It takes more than just working through your intuition and so on.
Rick, I remember when Mr. Keshe was talking about presenting his papers to, I think, a lady scientist, highest level physicist in Belgium for the first time. Our government asked this high level physicist to analyze what he was talking about in his papers. So she was reading through, and I get the impression when she read that long paragraph about the creation of, which finishes creation of gravity MT Keshe, I think that was when she folded all the papers up and said, yes, he has found gravity and what gravity is for the first time. And her quote, I think Mr. Keshe said, was, "He is a genius." And it was the beginning of all sorts of reactions in the scientific community. I think they then realized that he was actually onto something that had never been understood with all the scientific information up to date.
Yes, good point.
There's the anecdote he also told us about the way he used to get into the chambers there in London University. And the professors thought he was nuts because he was exposing himself to all that radiation and it didn't affect him.
Well, other than he became who he is, and maybe they took the radiation to do that, to make Mr. Keshe
and the Italians also detected when they did all the studies when he was exposed to the poison last time.
Mm-hmm. So it mentions here in the patent so that the system can be a power generator, and then with a slight change in one of the parameters of one of the gases or introduction of other elements, the system will become a gravity machine. Then maybe by combining the two effects, one will have a system that not only generates energy, but it holds gravity and creates anti-gravity too. So this is basically the energy system, but it's also the gravitational system. And that's why it's a Pandora's box. And when you start to open this up for the energy, then you've also started to open it up for the gravity as well. So this is the conundrum in a way, and this is why we need world peace in order to start introducing the energy system, which is the core of the gravity system in the spaceships. Yeah, it gets into all the specifics here. It's a very long patent. What we just covered here so far is only about 1/10 of it. And I think it's about 120 pages altogether. It's by far the longest patent I've ever encountered or seen or heard of in the world. And it just goes on. Some of it's repetitive, but he goes on to emphasize the various applications and just describing some of these things here. Like, let's just look at this. There are also products related to the creation of double or more magnetic fields, superimposed, at least two, and fully encirculating each other in layers on top of each other for multi-layer shielding of an object, or at least one magnetic field can rotate in one direction, or at least one rotating in the opposite direction to one or more fields, like for the use in a submarine or spacecraft industry, air and space transport systems, and devices such as with magnetic shielding effect with the creation of implosion gravity, and non-air friction systems, products for the welding industry, this being material or atomic welding or molecular welding. New electronic devices and components become possible, such as computers, scanners, etc., with 3D dynamic layers, nano-wire transistors, three-dimensional screens, three-dimensional communication holographic systems, etc., and various aspects of nanotechnology, where the minute machines needed to be energized and controlled, and the packages of energy can be made or delivered to the energy cells or the battery of a system for it to continue operation, and so on. Communication systems, energy systems, new decontamination systems, and growth-provoking magnetic conditions for human, animal, and plant cells and life, such as plasma multicolored light, and radiation protection, CO2 decomposition system, etc., are possible. Another field of applications is in the field of housing concepts and products, due to the use of the magnetic field shielding as an object to prevent passage or block or obscure the view into or out of an object, like as doors or walls for entering into or out of an object, like the door of a house or walls of the house, or as replacement of or the glass or any other materials used for this purpose, where the double glazing or any kind of glazing or prevention of entry of small or certain object can be predetermined by the field, like to be used as mosquito nets and window fly nets, or as umbrellas for preventing the sun or the rain from reaching any matter or object, roofing and flooring. So we're talking about using the fields to replace all these matter level objects that we currently have. I mean, it's
what a beautiful future. What a beautiful future. And now
Tom Sellis's garden in Dominica, hey?
Yeah, that's what came to mind actually, Doug. That's right. So yeah, it goes on. Several consumer products will be created, such as textiles with memory and vacuum suits for human or animals or any object in possession of internal gravity for play or industrial or space application, like toys, such as human lifting belts and sporting products. All sorts of material used for floating, belts for levitation where gravity can be reversed, magnetic shield bowls, diving suits for submerging into any liquid or gas and in possession of gravity and heating elements. Products, machinery, and applications become possible which are related to using the magnetic pressures for the production or shaping of all kinds of material or containers, and use in the pressure molding and pressure casting, or for the pressure pump systems of all types of materials and matters, like water pumps, injectors for computer industry printing and etching systems and lithography, printing industry, and plating and lamination industry. Zero gravity machines and other medical devices and applications. Let's read about that. That might be interesting here. Also, new medical devices and applications are possible due to the creation of one or more soft magnetic fields for matching the magnetic field, but at the same time in possession of gravitational force system with the temperature level control requirements for medical use, like for reseating of the magnetic or energy levels of human cell, for eradication of cancer cell from a tissue, for blood cell for blood cancer, like a dialysis machine, or creation of condition for the growth of a body part in the exact position on the body of remote matter or organs replacement without cutting tissues or organs from outside to reach the organs or part in the matter. This is an unintrusive surgery. Incubators for premature born child where the gravity can be reduced to allow breathing in softer conditions where heat and liquid condition of the internal environment of the mother reproduction organs can be replicated, incubators for animal production, etc., etc. Here's the atomic welding. That was the question earlier. Atomic welding applications in technology becomes a simpler way to produce or fuse matter together than fusion methods, where large energies are required to fuse the atoms together. Where atomic welding brings to near similar atoms or molecules together and only add one electron or proton or a neutron for the two atoms to become one, which is in reality the reverse of atomic decay or half-life system method, which the world of science has never understood, where, for example, potassium goes through beta decay to become argon, where if one adds a beta in the magnetic and gravitational condition, one can create potassium from argon, thus applying the material creation in the universe, where the atoms do not start always from hydrogen and go to uranium, but they just simply weld into higher elements to create heavier elements, like creating the 113 element out of iron 56 and 57, which is a double magnetic element and therefore can be called magnetically a dark matter.
This is transmutation.
Yes, exactly, John. Mm-hmm. And this is what was talked about. I wonder if I can pull up that statement from Nikola Tesla. Let's see if I can find it here.
Looks like the current structures are shaking.
Well, think of all the applications. Just talking about all the applications would be enough to shake the roots, all right, because it's so all-encompassing. It's just crazy.
Rick, Tesla also detected sort of a scintillation effect when he used to turn on a circuit on the other side of a copper plate, and behind this copper plate he could detect the pinching of some ray hitting him. I don't know if you read about that.
I'm not so sure about that one. Yeah.
Yeah, he used to detect this, and nobody could make out what it was. And what called his attention is it went right through the copper, which supposedly could protect you from any electrical effect. That there was sort of a transversal ray that went through the copper.
So, geez, where is that quote? I'd like to find it here. Well, I can't find it too rapidly here, but I have to go through all his quotes. But essentially, he talked about the when mankind is able to transmute the elements. Maybe it's just transmute elements. Let's quote. When mankind is able to transmute the elements, that'll be the indicator of the major change of change of times, a change of mankind, basically, that will go through a major transition when we have that power. Well, I can't find it here. It's getting taking too long. So suffice to say, there is a quote from Tesla about that. Believe me. You just have to believe me for now. Okay, well, so we've gone on quite a long time about this. There's another picture of the interaction of the layers and fields and so on. And this is all the information is in here. The Caroline core, the outer core, the static core, the soft body core, the central column, blah, 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 all the gauges and measurements, the pump system, all the ins and outs of the operation of the reactor, the startup of the reactor condition, the principal output measurement parameters of the reactor, notes and safety, shutdown and safety of the reactor core, safety aspects and parameters of the system, and so on and so forth. And like
And
I
that's
say,
on the Spaceship Institute site?
I'm not sure if the patent is readily available there. I think it is somewhere. I just, whenever I go for it, I just look up Keshe patent, and it comes up with several links. This one is in the Google patents.
Rick,
And
I posted
you
it in
can
the
also
chat.
look at the European, pardon me?
I posted the link to it in the chat just there.
Okay, that's for the Google patents, right? And you can also look at just the European patents, and it shows up there as well.
Yeah, you look it up by the number, the 1770717A1.
Yes, that's the actual particular patent. There's a couple of other patents as well, which are similar, but not as in depth of this one.
I thought it would be on one of the websites.
Well, it should be up in center, I think, actually. I'm going to recommend that that gets changed for our new website that's coming up soon here. It's interesting. He talks about this magnetic hydrogen mixture is the seed of the earth. The semi-fusion state of affairs in the inner sanctum of the earth is the reason for continuous creation of heat from the center of the earth radiating outward. And the hydrogen mixture is the seed of the earth, and this is why the magnetic field in the center of the earth is and will not disappear for a long time. And he just gets into more and more and more and more and more details. It goes on and 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 on. And there's even a couple of calculations in there. Very simple. volume of a sphere. There's one calculation. But you don't see big calculations in that in Mr. Keshe's work. It's very strange in that regard, in terms of physics and chemistry and whatnot, which generally seem to operate through various formulas and whatnot.
Or in space.
Right. You don't get formulas in space.
It gets down to concepts and not formulas.
Yeah, he does talk about ratios, for example, with the ratios of the gases and so on. And he has some fairly exact calculations for those, but again, it's fairly straightforward. And it does get into some pretty specific measurements and conditions that are necessary for all this to occur. Yeah, so that's available for people to follow through in even more depth, depending on how far you want to go with things. But if you're looking for a project and you're complaining, Judd, you haven't seen enough demonstration, and how come nothing's being done? Why, I think I should do something. Well, this is a great blueprint to go ahead and choose one of these designs using the concepts in this patent to follow through on, to actually build a reactor based on the concepts and see what happens. Try to create the effects that are talked about in here. Because this is something that was never properly followed through in the early days. No one that I know of fully created the what you might call the correct Keshe reactor, using all the principles involved and having it work properly, because it's hard to create the ideal vacuum condition. You've got a bunch of seals and tubes and gases and all this stuff going on. There's lots of room for errors and for contaminants to get involved and for things not to ignite properly and so on. There's a lot that could go wrong in terms of being incorrect to create the effects that we'd like to see. Okay, any more questions or comments about that?
I've been working away all night and all day today, getting something really special for you guys. So if it's appropriate, I'd like to share something with you guys.
Okay, that'd be great, Thomas. Sure, go ahead.
It's safe to come out of the closet now?
Yeah, I think so.
Cool. So it's interesting. Last week, I showed you guys the pod, and what brought it up was Armin showing a lot of the older reactor designs, and one that caught my attention was the dome. I think he actually had two dome-shaped copper compartments to shield the reactor system completely. So it's interesting. We were talking about shielding, and I had the idea that that's what the pod does. And then, next day I go on, and that was the topic of discussion with Mr. Keshe, that if you could shield your system, have far more control. So I did it. I got it all ready for you guys. So I've been waiting to flick it on. So I'll share just the photos first, then I'll share a video if that's all right.
Yeah, sure.
Does that come up?
Yes, so let me get it maximized here for the live stream. All right, that looks interesting. You better explain.
Well, I think you saw my SketchUp I did on the computer, and it's interesting. Some of the stories I've heard about UFOs is that they're spinning a metallic superfluid like mercury or something. So I'm wondering if that's like kind of the same thing. They're shielding off the reactors. So basically, I incorporated the same design in the pod, and I am so sorry. Is there music playing?
Yeah, we hear some music coming through. You have to be careful of that. We can get nabbed for.
I honestly, I did not turn that on. Can you mute me?
Where's it coming from? From your area somewhere? Okay, you gotta mute. You gotta mute till you sort it out there, Thomas.
Sorry.
Yeah, we can't have background music, even a few bars of music, and they claim our copyright on the video. And then you have to watch ads in order to play the video. Hopefully you can work that out, because
I'm so sorry, Rick. That honestly, I didn't. I was just sorting through my screen share, and I flipped through some of the my browsers. I didn't click on the browser, but I guess I scrolled over it, and then it just it turned on.
Okay.
So, I'm sorry about that.
That's good. Okay, well, carry on.
Yeah. Okay.
We have what? We've got an in and out sort of in this. Is there one inlet and one outlet in this tubing setup, or is there two sets of tubing?
There is two sets of tubing. Is it still sharing?
Yep.
Oh, okay. I'm such a noob with with Zoom. Hold on.
I think we're all noobs with Zoom because they keep changing things every week with new updates and switching things around on us. So it always keeps us on their toes.
It's weird because I clicked stop screen share, so I can't. I just see you right now, but
Oh, well, you better reshare or something, because it is sharing your screen, but it's just that you're not seeing your screen.
What's the red stuff? So the CH3 sort of stuff, or what?
Oh no, that's just my printed 3D printed structure design. Actually, 1 second here. I can't see. I don't have a screen share.
Try resharing your screen, and it should come up for you, I think.
Where am I? It's weird. I don't even have a.
You don't see.
Sorry. Yeah, it was hiding. It was hiding up top there. Okay, I'm gonna stop and reshare. Okay. Back up again.
Yep.
Okay, so the yeah, there's a south entry tubing that goes all the way to the equator, and then that goes back down into the holding tank, and then there's another flow that begins at the equator and goes all the way to the top. So it's the same design I did with the health pod, gravitational feeding into magnetical. So yeah, that's just the red and the blue is just the printed plastic housing for the tubing, and it took me a long time to put this all together.
Yeah.
I was contemplating how to make a T-valve, and I was gonna like hot glue two tubes together, and then I remembered I have a 3D printer, so I printed up some T-valves for it. So and I will just show you. That's the setup right now. I just got a drill pump, but I will scale it up later and have two DC pumps. So so yeah, that's it. It's ready to go. The reactor's spinning inside. I just got to pulled the trigger and off she goes.
So basically you have a single core reactor spinning inside, and you got the coils of tubing with a GANs or something being pumped through the tubing at the same time, right?
Yes, and actually that's a double core. That's my dynamic double core.
So each core is adjustable. Is that the idea? Each core is.
Yep. I got two little computer boards there powering.
Nice.
Yeah, so it's pretty sweet actually. Right now it's being powered from my laptop. 5 volts, 2 amps is enough.
Nice.
So my video isn't the greatest. I apologize, but I try to make it all nice and clear for you guys. So I will share my video here and.
Okay, yeah, we see your video.
Hi guys. So yeah, there she is. And yeah, it's silent. You can't really hear the reactor spinning, but it is.
Oh wow, that's nice.
Yeah, it's just the hard drive motors. So they're yeah, they're nice and quiet, and brushless. So
Do you have trouble with hard drive motors conking out on you, seizing up or anything?
Yes, yeah. I was going to ask you about that actually because yeah, the star formation, it actually happens. It happened a few times already, and I unplugged the power, so it has no connection whatsoever, and it was still stiff.
Yeah. Yeah, I have a lot of trouble with hard drive motors. I've blown out 7 out of 10 actually.
Yeah.
So I've got a pile of them now. I'm not impressed with them other than they're nice and quiet and smooth and high speed, but they're only good for like ping pong balls. Anything bigger and it'll tend to blow out the bearings. Nice. Well, that's interesting. You've got a 2-core reactor plus the containment system.
Yeah, the two GANs flows. So I guess it'd be nice to have 2 separate GANs going for more of a shielding effect, I guess.
Or more of a gradient, like, yeah.
Yeah.
Like he was talking in the patent, and it has mentioned before for the shielding that one field will be going in one direction and one field in the opposite direction.
Yeah.
And so between the 2 fields and what's in between the fields, you have a 3-layer shielding effect. And that could be projected in front of a spaceship, kilometers in front of a spaceship. And because the 2 fields are both intense, but in different directions, they tend to deflect anything or dissolve anything that might encounter that field.
So I'm gonna pull the trigger now, and hopefully you can see the GANs go. So it might be a little loud.
Cool. Woo! Round and round she goes. So have you noticed any effects yet from this?
I was just trying to tune into it, but there's so much vibration coming from that drill, and I've got 3 reactors going off in the background right now. But yeah, that worked great. There's a little leak. leak from my plastic T-valve, so I just need to clamp those a bit better, but that works pretty well.
So what do you expect it will do? What do you hope it will do?
I don't know. I just sort of make things when I get the the pull to. And he said that if I were to make that pod smaller, that I could actually regrow brain tissue. So
yeah, it's interesting. This has come up from a couple of different sources recently. This idea, what is it called? Who was it that was working with it? I think it was the fellow John, and he was looking at this idea for a hat, actually, for a hat that you could have double rotating fields, and there's other ways. Guy was looking at this idea as well today. He wanted to create the Tesla, what's called the football coil, which is essentially what you have there, two concentric tapered coils together with their fat edge together, basically, and in that middle part there, and that football coil that was invented by Tesla, he used, of course, high voltage and high frequency into it, but it was called an anti-gravity coil. It had special properties according to Tesla. It's kind of one of his big secrets.
so I think the key with any system, like Mr. Keshe says, is you got to let it run to build up strength and find its position and balance. So
yeah,
it'd be nice to see how this thing would feel at running for a fair bit. But I just wanted to break the ice with you guys. So
yeah, nice, very nice. I like the idea.
Thanks.
I think it has great potential, and it even looks cool. It looks like a core reactor of a spaceship.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. Yeah, thanks. Well, that'll be it for me today.
All right, very good. Thank you, Thomas. All right, does anyone else have anything particular they'd like to present, or questions or statements? Did I miss anybody's questions here? I'm just looking at the live streams here.
Can I ask a question?
Sure, go ahead.
When two galaxies come together, I know they use the word collide, but I'm thinking more of when sweet water and salt water come together and they form brackish water. Now, I thought Mr. Keshe said the galaxy is like like an egg. They're very soft. They don't really hit each other hard like that, maybe unless you're in an area of a quasar, something really crazy or something out there. But they don't really smash like hard balls or something.
Right.
Somebody comment on that, John or Rick?
Well, it absolutely makes sense. It's more diffused. It's a diffusion of one into the other rather than a collision. It's like if you had, what's a good example? Like thinking of clouds or smoke or something, like two clouds could sort of bump into each other. They don't bounce off each other. They don't, they would just diffuse into each other and each become like the other, or they become like one entity rather than two bumping things.
Like a brackish water.
Yeah. Like one way to look at it might be if you had two hard-boiled eggs and try to smash them together, then you get one effect, which is generally a mess. But if you have two eggs that aren't cooked yet and were to mix them together with a fork or something, you would have one homogeneous mass. They both come together to form a larger entity without the conflict, without smashing together. They can just diffuse in each other. So I think that's the way the galaxies operate, or most things in space. Aside from, you could look at what do you call it, a meteorite coming in and hitting the Earth's atmosphere. That's quite in a way, a violent event, but it's still that heavy mass of metal that comes into the atmosphere gets absorbed, transformed into its elements, and basically made into dust through its interaction of hitting the atmosphere. Not sure where we're going with that, or where I was going with that.
No, it was just a general question.
But yeah, well, I think we pretty much covered it here. Maybe we should wrap things up. It's been, well, with our time delay, it's been about 3.5 hours or something. So it's probably enough to go off of. I sort of went on for quite a while about the patent, but there's a method to my madness. I want to inspire people to start thinking about some of the core roots of why we gathered here in this group in particular, and the thing about the Keshe Foundation in general. Many of us have gotten involved with the Ganses and the various healing effects, health effects, agricultural effects, and various other aspects of the Keshe technology. And I just wanted to remind people of the space technology, because at the core of it all, the Keshe Foundation is a space-based organization. And all the stuff we see for mankind and all the wonderful things is simply a byproduct of the space technology, not the core purpose of the Keshe Foundation, which is to be a space-based organization, a liaison between humans and space. So, in that sense, I wanted to remind people to take in the Knowledge Seekers Workshop coming up on Thursday, where Mr. Keshe has promised to make perhaps the most important announcement in the history of the Keshe Foundation. So some people have been given some indication of what that might be, and suffice to say that tune in, pay attention, and it may be time for the most important thing that the Keshe Foundation has presented. So, looking forward to that. And I think we'll see probably a bunch of teachings that come out of this whole topic that comes up. And I think it's going to be very exciting, and it's basically what I'm on the planet for, is to hear this kind of thing. So I'm looking forward to it, to say the least. Okay, that should be enough to give away part of the thing on Thursday, but I just wanted to sort of tease you a little bit so that you pay attention and take in the workshop. So try to do that. And I guess that's it for now for our Keshe Plasma Reactor group. I think there's a couple of messages I didn't see there. But
Thanks for your years of dedication, Rick, in making this thing fly.
yeah, literally trying to make it fly in many different ways.
Thank you.
And you're all welcome. Thank you very much for participating, being part of it, because without the audience, there is no show. There is no show, there's no action, no movement. We like to have action and movement in our lives as humans. That's part of the whole gig here, I think. And if all goes well, we're going to see the biggest action and movement of humankind in the next little while. So, exciting times. We're so lucky to be alive at this time and place. So thank you for attending today's workshop. And carry on in your experiments if you can. Try to line up something so that you have something in the physicality to kind of bounce off of, something that we can work with to learn to feel the fields and to interact with the fields, and hopefully with some stronger energy levels where we can see some more interesting effects as well. Okay, this is Rick out for Keshe Plasma Reactor Group for April 4th, 2018. Thanks to everybody for attending. See you next week. And make sure you're there for Thursday. Coming up on Knowledge Seekers Workshop, 9 a.m. Central European Time. Alrighty, I have to figure out how to shut down the show this time around. Hopefully I'll hit all the right buttons. Okay. That button. So far, so good. And let me see. This button, don't have a clue. This button. Couldn't tell you. I'll shut down the meeting and hopefully all the live things will shut down properly. All right, bye for now.